You are listening to Grab Them by the Pod, a member of the ACE Podcast Network. Thank you for joining us here at Grab Them by the Pod on this Memorial Day edition. I'm your host, Kevin, along with Jesse, and Memorial Day, originally known as Decoration Day, is in honor of those who died serving our country and standing up for what is best about the United States of America.
I didn't know that. Decoration Day. Where did that come from?
Well, that comes from the post-Civil War era. As you know, it was a very deadly war. All sides were American. And so it was the original celebration was to honor those who died in the Civil War by decorating their grave sites with flags and such. And it didn't become known officially as Memorial Day until a federal law was passed in 1967. Of course, after World War II, it really kind of caught on as Memorial Day as opposed to Decoration Day. But it wasn't until that 1967 federal law was passed that we get the formalization of the name Memorial Day.
And now that you're talking about Memorial Day, I want to give Ivanka Trump a pass. I was actually, just before you came on here, reading an article where people were giving her crap because her Twitter account was showing something to do, how to make iced tea, champagne popsicles for Memorial Day, and people were giving her crap about, it's Memorial Day. But, for a lot of people in America, it is the unofficial beginning of summer, too. So I'm willing to give her a break on that at least.
Sure, as long as they take a minute and reflect on what the real meaning of the day is.
Oh, the president did. He tweeted out some stuff about Memorial Day and lots more, which we'll get to in just a sec. But I want to start out just briefly from a personal standpoint, talking about former Senator Jim Bunning, who actually passed away Friday afternoon or Friday evening. He was actually a Baseball Hall of Famer. He threw a no-hitter in both the American League and the National League. I think the National League one was actually a perfect game. And I actually worked with him on the Senate Finance Committee. Our politics were very different from each other. We didn't agree on a lot of things, and quite honestly, he was kind of a pain in the ass, I'll say that. And I think even the people who are close to him would say that as well. But the reason I bring that up is because, one, I worked with him. Two, his niece is actually my mentor. Helped me become the person I am today. And Sue was actually in D.C. before he was, so he followed her, she would always say, not the reverse. But he was a former senator, and I do love baseball, so I figured I'd give Jim Bunning a shout-out and remember him a little bit.
Well, he was a 9-time All-Star, winning 224 games and had 2,855 strikeouts in his career. And according to Sports Illustrated, he was an economics major in college, and he negotiated his own contracts, which perhaps is what led him down the road towards politics. Oddly enough, he was a union activist for the Major League Baseball Players Association in his day as a player rep for his union, and he turned around and became a fairly conservative Republican senator. Time magazine branded him one of the 5 worst senators back in 2006. He was known for some crazy outbursts like the one in 2009 where he suggested that Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg would be dead within 9 months. He also called one of his former opponents a lookalike for Saddam Hussein's son. So not always the easiest to get along with, but certainly made his mark in 2 major fields.
Yeah, he often got in fights with my boss, who was the staff director of the Senate Finance Committee back in the day. And, behind closed doors, he claims that he made Rand Paul because by retiring, he let Rand Paul run for Senate and win. So love him or hate him, goodbye to Senator Jim Bunning. So to the stuff of the day that I really loved talking about, Donald Trump, as we all know, was on a foreign trip for the last week or so. And while he was on that trip, his Twitter was actually a little more, I want to say reserved. He had a couple tweets here or there, but it wasn't anything crazy. Then come Sunday morning, oh my God, the guy lost his mind. So I'm going to go through some of these tweets really quickly. First of all, early on in the morning, he tweets, just arrived in Italy, which was weird because he had actually left Italy the day before, so that was eventually deleted. Then he started tweeting about the Republican Montana election, how they wanted to, big win for Montana Republicans. We left that there. 5 minutes later, so he deleted that and reposted it without the we. Then I guess he remembered that he wasn't landing in Italy. He was actually coming back from Europe and tweeted that, just returned from Europe. He got that right. And then some of the really insane stuff happened. In my opinion, many of the leaks coming out of the White House are fabricated lies made up by the fake news media. Whenever you see the words sources say in fake news media, and they don't mention names, it's very possible that those sources don't exist. By the way, he said exist. He spelled it EXSIST, are made up by the fake news writers. Fake news is the enemy. He eventually retweeted that with it spelled correctly. But what's dangerous about that right there, again, he's not saying when you see sources say it's fake, he's saying it may be fake. And that leaves it open to say, I didn't say it was fake. I said it might be. It's what he always does. He asks questions, quote unquote. He doesn't outright accuse. And that's dangerous because it's open to interpretation by some crazies, I think.
Well, you see, it's self-consolation. The more he says it, the more he tells himself and his supporters that, it's the fake news that is the problem. That's the dangerous thing. In his mind, everything he's done is okay. He's feeling bad for himself, pitying himself and consoling himself that it's just the fake media that's out to get him. Nothing he has done is wrong, instead of looking at the facts. To me, the more dangerous, the more scary thing are fact deniers. That's what scares me more than fake news.
Yeah, and what do you want him to say? President Trump's secretary leaked this information to us. Here's what she said. When they say sources to say, it's because if you say who those sources are outright, they're not going to give you any information, or they're not going to give you anything to begin with, because people need the anonymity to be able to feel safe to give them that information.
It's unbelievable sometimes. And you know what? Like you said, it was so quiet for those 10 days that he was out of the country. It was like a glimmer of hope that things could be like they used to be. I guess all they need to do is just give him something to do. He needs busy work. The man needs busy work. Send him on a trip somewhere. Make him deal with some other foreign heads of state. He's too busy to tweet.
Be careful what you wish for. That could just become an even bigger thing right there.
Yeah, it's true. So
then he started tweeting about the Montana win in the congressional race in Montana. And, this is kind of old news by now, but this Montana Republican, he was then House candidate, and he since won, Greg Gianfort. He actually body-slammed reporter Ben Jacobs last week. It's crazy. And he ended up winning the seat because even though that happened like a day before, so 3/4 of the vote was already in there. And let's not kid ourselves, this was a seat the Republicans should have won, but much like a lot of these recent elections, they're closer than they should be. So the fact that Trump is touting this win, they were always supposed to win this, but it's the fact that it's closer. He should be worried about that there are like 50 other seats that are much, much closer than these, closer than the John Ossoff race even. So if the ones that should be winning are getting close, the ones that are up in the air and toss-ups, you should be afraid.
Well, I think the bigger area of concern, Jesse, is that it just shows that there continues to be a lack of civility in our society, in our politics. It's all the way up to the Capitol now. This guy's now going to Congress, taking a seat in the House of Representatives with a misdemeanor charge of having assaulted a reporter because the reporter did what? Said something he didn't like, was going to report on something that he didn't like. And, I used to say that, well, yes, we have some incivility, we have some issues, but we're not as bad as we were in the antebellum years leading up to the Civil War, where we had members of Congress fighting on the floor of the House or the floor of the Senate. Well, hey, maybe now we're starting to get back to that, and something needs to be done.
I used to work for Montana Senator Max Baucus, who later became the Chinese ambassador under Obama towards the end there. But I can't imagine any of the people I used to work with from Montana thinking this was okay. People seem to think, well, maybe it's just how politics is done in Montana. And they do, I guess, lean right a little bit, but they had Democratic senators from there. And I knew some wacky people who worked that office, but nobody wacky enough to start attacking reporters. I actually really like their press secretary, so maybe they should hire her. I don't know. So, we thought we were done. That was Sunday. And then this morning, a few other things popped up. I'll just go over very briefly. Again, he says we have to spend more money on health care. Obamacare's dead. Republicans couldn't do much better, which is ridiculous because his budget cuts some things like Medicaid. So he's saying we want to spend more money on health care and then having a budget that cuts things. And he also says, tax reform, massive tax cuts are underway. The process is moving along well. No, it's not. It's moving slow. We haven't even seen the real plan. We saw the bullet point that he put out, a month ago or so. And then finally, again, with the fake news, he says, the fake news works hard to disparage me and demean my use of social media because they don't want America to hear the real story. So he's not tweeting crazy things. It's the fake news media who's telling people that he's tweeting crazy things.
Well, and it's the he said, she said game, right? If he throws it out there, then there's always the plausibility, the deniability, right?
Yeah. His tweet, as Sean Spicer always says, the president's tweets speak for themselves. They're insane most of the time. It's not the fake news media reporting that it's crazy. Take it for what it's worth. They're nuts.
Well, maybe that's code, coming from Spicy. He had a pretty rough week. We'll talk about that later. But, maybe he's been trying to clue us in all along, and we just haven't been paying attention.
Yeah, he's been blink twice if you need help. He's been trying to give us little undercover stories and little I don't even know what I'm trying to say. So we will, I'm sure he'll be tweeting before we even know it. So we'll go back there and see what he has to say on Twitter in the coming days and weeks and months and all that fun stuff. So it seems like a lifetime ago. What was it, like a month and a half ago that we were talking about healthcare reform again. The House finally got rid of a really crappy version, voted it out of the House to the Senate. Makes no sense why they did it, because the previous version of it, the CBO scored that 24 million people were going to be without health care in a decade. So they added a couple things, took a couple things out, and then did it again without knowing any better. They finally released the score from the Congressional Budget Office, and it says that they did better on this one. Only 23 million people are going to be losing their health care in 10 years. That's a win, right? Right?
Success. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. 23 million as opposed to 24. 1 million more people will have health insurance or something like that.
I mean, we're saving $119 billion. Yeah, it's really easy to save money when these people aren't going to have health care. It's so interesting to see how I've changed, Kevin, over the last decade or so. Because I'm reading articles of people saying, healthcare isn't a human right. If they want healthcare, get a better job. Blah blah. Those are things I may have said in college. I've since changed my tune on a lot of those things. Everybody I think deserves some kind of healthcare. I don't know how it can, the variations of it are, but you can't just take this away from people, tell them that they're getting a better system and hope they believe you. This is going to eventually bite them in the butt. If it's not in 2020, 2024, 2022, one of these years, eventually people are going to realize, especially the people who are in Trump country, are going to realize they're not better off than they are right now.
Well, and some of those people, as you said, are they stand to lose the most out of all of this, right? Many Trump areas of this country that went for Donald Trump in the election stand to lose the most. People who are underserved already, who maybe voted as value voters or things like that, now they stand to lose some of the benefits that keep them going. And, some of the light bulbs are starting to go off saying, wait a minute, I didn't realize this was going to happen.
If you're old and poor, you're pretty much screwed. Under the current plan, if you're 64 years old and not earning very much money, say you earn like $26,000, $27,000, you have to pay almost 850% more for a plan compared to the ACA. And again, it's not like 100% more, 200% more. It's 850% more is a possibility. And again, these people are screwed. I mean, there's no other way of putting it. They are screwed if they're in this situation. Again, I think we have the luxury of having good jobs and being able to afford good health care, but not everybody has that luxury. And these are the people who I don't know what they're going to do if this actually goes through.
Well, that's just the point, if it actually goes through. So all hope is not lost, because the good news is that, as we mentioned before, the Senate is not going to go with this bill. They're going to start over with their own rendition. And, just a little point of politics 101 here of how laws are made. The identical bill has to pass both houses before going to the president to be signed into law. And there stands to be little chance that the identical bill is going to pass the Senate that passed the House, and vice versa. So this is going to be tied up for some time before we ever think about it being signed into law.
And the interesting part will be, once the Senate passes whatever they pass, it may not be a good bill, but it'll be better than this version. Will the Freedom Caucus just rubber stamp it and sign off and get it passed, or they cause a big ruckus again and then cause us to go into free fall all over again? We're gonna have to wait and see, but it's going to be a mess. And the bigger question is, even if a different version passes, are the people who voted for this bill in the House going to be tied to this? People are going to see what this bill actually would do come 2018. Will they actually have to face that at the voting booth, or will they just say, you know what, we knew it was never going to pass, so don't blame us. It's not our fault.
Remains to be seen, but either way, nothing looks good.
Nothing looks good. No. To top that off, we also got some more information on the Trump budget this week. A month or two ago, we got a little information of it coming. I think they were calling it the skinny budget. It's when we saw a lot of programs like Meals on Wheels are possibly going to be cut, a lot of things like that. And again, it's just as bad now as it looked back then. I mean, Medicaid and poverty assistance programs are screwed. The budget is going to propose to cut Medicaid funding by more than $600 billion over the course of a decade. And by the way, that's apparently separate, but overlapping. I'm not sure exactly how that's going to work with the $800 billion to be cut from the American Health Care Act. There's going to be $272 billion cut from the welfare system. Food stamp program cut by $190 billion over a decade. Temporary assistance for needy families. It's over and over and over. The people who need the most help are getting screwed the hardest. And Budget Director Mick Mulvaney will tell you, no, you're insane. This is great for poor people. This is great for the underprivileged.
Listen, I am not naive enough to think that the welfare system in America doesn't need reforms. It does. There are people who abuse it. But we can't throw the entirety away because there are some people who abuse the system. We need to look for ways that we can fix it. And certainly cutting $272 billion is not going to fix it. It's only going to decimate it for the people who do need it and who do use it appropriately.
This is the story of the Trump I think the Trump administration, probably the Trump campaign as well, is that most of these things, they have some good parts that you have to be reformed. You said but they don't want to reform. They want to throw it all out, start brand fresh, because then you can say, it's the Trump brand. This isn't Obamacare tweaked by Trump. This is Trump care. It's a bad way to face things because when you get rid of the stuff that works and you replace it with things that don't work just for the sake of saying that it's yours and you own it, you're not trying to help the people who need the help. You're trying to help yourself and try to leave your own lasting legacy. And honestly, for a president, I know they're obsessed with their legacy, but legacy should be less important than – your legacy should be helping people. And if that means taking President Obama's plan and making it better, well, then that's what you should be doing.
Legacies are built in the future. It's the way that people are going to look back on what you did. And if what you did not have a positive effect, your legacy is going to be terrible.
Yeah. They're also screwing over indebted government workers. They're going to be cutting $27 billion over – everything's over a decade. They're going to by getting rid of student loan programs for government workers or limiting subsidized student loans. It's going to save another $39 billion. But the things they are leaving in is, again, I think this is actually good, but it's Ivanka's pet plan is paid family leave for parents, for adopted parents. It doesn't matter where the kid comes from, which I think that's great. I'm not you're a parent. I'm not, but I'm sure you can definitely back subsidized leave for things like that, right?
This absolutely is great. This is the best thing in the budget as far as I'm concerned. And, people criticize us sometimes and say that, we're too biased and we bash Donald Trump. When you can ever give him some credit? Well, I'll give him credit for this. This is a great idea. And lo and behold, it's a plan that actually helps people. They should take a cue from this. More programs like this should be in the budget.
Yeah, and this helps people. Doesn't matter what their income is, whether they're rich, poor, and in between. If you have kids and you need time off, boom, it helps you out. They're also looking to help out border agents, of course, because that's all part of the Trump brand again. $300 million is being invested to recruit, hire, and train 500 new Border Patrol agents and 1,000 new ICE agents. And there's going to be $2.6 billion for the wall. That's how I want to spend $2.6 billion, right? Not on healthcare or education or anything. Let's build a giant wall because, America first. We have to save America.
Well, and funny you should mention education, Jesse, because it takes one of the biggest hits in this entire budget. Right, the 2017 budget for education, federal education budget, was $68.2 billion. It's going to be down to $59 billion for 2018. That's a 13.5% decrease, whereas things like defense get a 10.1% increase. There's something inherently wrong with this.
How's the song go? I believe the children are the future. That's you have to focus on. It seems unpatriotic to some people if you say the military doesn't need any more money, but we have the greatest military in the world, possibly the greatest military of all time. We don't need to put all this money. We've said this time and time again. We're not going to be having ground wars like we used to back in the day. Maybe we focus less on these wars that may be coming up and more on making sure people are educated and that. I will say presidents like this aren't elected in the future that want to cause more wars.
Right. If we prevent war, it'll cost us less money. And hey, what do you know? You have more to spend in other places.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest part that we haven't mentioned for this budget is that people are just making fun of Mulvaney and of Trump because there's apparently a $2 trillion math error. That's what people are saying. If the budget assumes that the faster economic growth will help pay for Trump's huge tax cuts, but then it also says that the same growth will help balance the budget. So they consider that counting that $2 trillion twice. Mick Mulvaney says, you're nuts. We're not double counting it, but no one's really buying that, especially Republicans in Congress. I mean, hell, John McCain has said, along with other people, have said this budget is dead on arrival. I mean, his actual quote was, President Trump's $603 billion defense budget request is inadequate to the challenge we face, illegal under current law, and part of an overall budget proposal that is dead on arrival in Congress. It doesn't sound like it's going anywhere. So the question I have for you, Kevin, is why did they put out this budget if it was never going to pass? What are they can only lose, I feel, here.
Yeah, because President Trump attempts to rule by fiat and then has shown how the system of checks and balances actually works. I mean, see the travel ban if you want an example. He thinks that he can just hand something down from on high, and then because he is the president, as if he was acting as the CEO of his corporation once again, that what he says goes. That's not how a democratic system of government works.
So we'll see when this process actually goes through, but I think the budget that passes will look literally nothing like this. Hopefully it'll be much, much better. So on to our good old friend Jared Kushner. We've always said that in an administration of madmen, he may just be crazy, and so as a result, we just I personally like him more just by the people who surround him. But Jared Kushner might be screwed. I don't know if daddy-in-law is going to throw him under the bus or not, but he's being investigated. The Washington Post last week reported that Kushner tried to establish a back-channel line of communications between the Trump transition team in Moscow back in December. This is back when he was meeting with Russian ambassador and, as we repeat, head spy of Russia, Sergei Kislyak. Then the New York Times reported that the purpose of the back channel was to allow our good old friend Michael Flynn to communicate directly with Moscow about Syria and other issues. This was never set up, but that hardly seems a point right now. I mean, it's another situation where it's Russia, Trump administration, lots of smoke. When are we going to accept there's probably a fire someplace?
Yeah, this is not the hotline that was established between Kennedy and Khrushchev right after the Cuban Missile Crisis. This is much more sinister.
At the very least, it's bad optics. And again, they should know this by now. I mean, I don't understand how these people who can be so smart can't tell that, in the midst of everything going on with Russia and possible hacking stuff, maybe, just maybe, we don't set this up. But, they don't care. So people are saying Kushner should take a leave of absence. Donald Trump came out today or yesterday and basically said he stands by Jared Kushner. Hell, National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster says he isn't concerned because, this could be a totally normal request. And, as I said, yeah, it could. But I don't know how many times we could say, yeah, this could be okay. It just drives me nuts. And I love the quote from Kushner's lawyer. It says, Mr. Kushner participated in thousands of calls in this time period. He has no recollection of the calls as described. That's, lying 101. I have no recollection of the events in question, sir. It just does not seem like somebody who's innocent would say those kind of things.
Well, I don't know if this would help or hurt the situation. So many times, as we've talked before, Jared Kushner seems to be somewhat of a voice of reason in this administration. And if he goes down, who's there to maybe counter some of the more outlandish ideas of Trump?
Ivanka would be the only person left, and God help us. Daddy, did you? No, honey. Okay. I don't know exactly what to think of Ivanka. I mean, she's done some stupid stuff. She's done some stuff I actually like. I don't know what power she actually has there and how much she actually differs from Donald. I don't know.
Oh.
It's just, it hurts my insides when I think of, these are the people that we're relying on, people that we kind of don't like. We only kind of don't like them as opposed to people we really don't like. And McMaster, man, he's actually been getting calls to resign just because people were worried about you're hurting your credibility, man. He wrote a book on, I think it was Johnson in Vietnam and how he misused power and screwed up everything.
Dereliction of duty.
Yeah, and boom, you're seeing this happen right again. So it's pretty ironic that he's the guy there right now participating in a lot of this because we've really praised McMaster as being the voice of reason, being the adult in a room of children before, and I don't know what to expect if he sticks around for a long time.
Yeah, I hate to call him a sellout. I really do because, I've thought like you that he was one of the people that we could trust maybe of holding Donald Trump accountable to things. But so far he seems to have been just a yes man, and I really hope that he can snap out of that.
Yeah. Do you want a guy that we kind of like being a yes man, or do you want him replaced by someone else who will also be a yes man who doesn't have the same pedigree? I think he can stick it out and hopefully be the voice. Although apparently Trump finds him annoying and thinks he talks too much, all that stuff, which is a very Trumpian way to address the situation.
Yeah, we keep trying to make the best out of a bad situation, but I just want this bad situation to go away.
Yeah. Well, I have to say that his trip to the Middle East and to the Vatican and a couple other places, I'll say it wasn't as bad as it could have been. That's the most praise I can give it. So we went to Saudi Arabia, didn't start a holy war or anything, so that's good. Then he landed in Israel, and he told a room full of Israelis that I just got back from the Middle East. Just got here from the Middle East. Like, dude, there's actually a guy face palming in the crowd. I know anybody can mistalk. I'm sure I misspeak all of the time, but come on, man.
Yeah. Geography must not have been his strong suit as a boy.
Along with many, many other things. By the way, back to H.R. McMaster. Again, there's rumors that he's being kicked out or being on the way out. So Trump met with Netanyahu, who is the president. Is he president or prime minister?
Prime minister.
Yeah. Because I always mix it because prime minister has all the power. The president's kind of like the Queen of England, just kind of waves and says hi. But Netanyahu met with Trump, and Netanyahu brought his national security advisor, and Trump made McMaster wait outside the door. Which I don't know. He demeaned a lot of his staff, I think, on this trip, which is just not a good look.
Oh, he has to put them in their place. He reminds them he's the president.
Yeah, I mean, hell, he went to visit the Pope, and Sean Spicer is apparently known throughout Washington D.C. as being this devout Catholic. He wears the ash on Ash Wednesday. Everybody knows that he loves the Pope. And he doesn't bring him to see the Pope. Instead, he brings like his Dan Scavino, his social media director. I mean, come on. That's just saying a big F you to Spicy, who is there taking the hits every single day for Trump and the crazy things he says. I feel bad for Spicy. I really do.
Well, as Connecticut residents, though, we should feel happy that we were represented because his communication advisor, Hope Hicks, who's a Greenwich, Connecticut native, was in the room with Donald Trump and Pope Francis. That's
just really like New York City North.
True.
She's from there. Did you go to school there? I wonder.
She went to Greenwich High, I believe.
Oh, maybe I'll look her up, see what her deal is. No matter how it is, I'll take Connecticut, whether it's Greenwich or whether it's up north by us. So some of the real nonsense started to happen though once he left these handshaking meetings for the most part. He went and met with NATO, or the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. As we all know about NATO, the most famous line that goes with them is that an attack against one is an attack against all. And Trump was the only leader there who basically would not publicly commit to that. And if you won't commit to that, what the hell's the point? Especially when Russia's been acting up and going a little nutty. You want to have the reassurance that the United States is going to stand by its commitments, and who the hell knows if we would at this point.
Well, and the only time in the history of the organization, which was created at the onset of the Cold War, the only time it was ever invoked, Article 5, the attack against one is attack against all, was after September 11, 2001, in defense of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Do we not owe it to those other countries in Europe who are feeling the heat from some places in the world now? I think it's important for the president to look at what this organization is really meant to be before he does anything too rash.
Trump would be the first person yelling at them for not doing their part, but not helping us out when he needs their help. Hell, he basically spent his time chastising the world leaders at NATO and saying, give us more money. You're not paying your fair share. I mean, Bush's director of national intelligence was like he's being an embarrassment. It's crazy. I love, by the way, when he met with the new French president, Emmanuel Macron, he wouldn't give in to the Trump handshake.
They kind of grab and pull.
Yeah, they were kind of gritting and bearing and white knuckling it. Neither one giving any. And I think he has a new bromance with Trudeau because they're both young guys. They both speak French. And maybe these are two of the new young world leaders on the national stage.
I think Trudeau's wife's a little younger, though.
How young is she?
Oh, I don't know, but Macron's wife is 64 years old. Was once his teacher
Whoa,
when he was in high
really?
school.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I knew that actually. Maybe the girls' night out. Yeah, they don't have anything to talk about. And that's weird. One's a baby boomer and one's a millennial. It seems maybe I don't know.
Who are we to judge?
Yeah, who am I to judge? Love is love. That's all that matters. So after NATO, he then met with went to the G7 meeting, group of seven. And to people who don't know, G7 is a group consisting of Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, UK, US, and then we have some some EU countries represented there as well. So Trump, again, is the only leader not to commit to the Paris Agreement, which is a UN agreement dealing with greenhouse emissions, the environment, things like that. And as we've seen with the Trump administration from the very beginning, they don't seem to care about the environment. They don't think things like global warming or climate change are really that big of a deal. And now the whole world does it too. And it's a little embarrassing to me.
Yeah, and Brandon Carter over at The Hill reported recently that Trump is privately saying he will leave the Paris climate change agreement. Hey, I'm no scientist, but I can tell that the climate is changing. You see it, you feel it. But, why should we be a part of that Paris agreement?
No, because, United States is going to do what United States is going to do because we're cowboys and that's how we do everything. But did you see the video of when, who was the president he pushed out of the way when he wanted to kind of get through and then he fixed his suit like he's a badass? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I know. Off the top of my head, I can't recall which one that was, but certainly it's it's a classic Trump.
Yeah. So, and then there was actually some talk that Trump wasn't paying attention when the Italian prime minister was speaking. If you look, everybody there is wearing headphones, not unlike what we're wearing right now while we record this. And Trump just making a very Trump face. He's just kind of staring off at the desk. And you can't see any headphones, and people are like, "What's going on? He's not listening. It's ridiculous." And Spicer just go out, no, he's wearing an earpiece just like everybody else. So while everybody else is wearing headphones, he's like wearing my grandfather's hearing aid. It doesn't make much sense to me that they would make a special hearing plug just for him. I think he just didn't give a crap and wasn't paying attention.
What's he thinking about when he stares off into space like that? What goes through Trump's mind?
I think he's thinking, I'd rather be golfing right now. Why did I run for president? This is horrible. I could be at home grabbing what. Maybe not. I don't want to be overly negative just for the sake of being negative. But speaking of golf, all of the G7 leaders walked 700 yards for a photo op, and Trump got into a golf cart and was late and followed behind because, God forbid. That's what happens when your main diet consists of McDonald's and KFC. He's not in the best shape, and also he has to do what Trump's going to do on his own.
See, now Donald Trump has some really unorthodox views about health and exercise. According to CNN editor-at-large Chris Cillizza, who quoted a May 8th New Yorker article by Evan Osnos, Trump, and I quote, Trump argues that exercise is misguided, that a person is like a battery and is born with a finite amount of energy, which exercise depletes.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Right. He believes that standing in front of a crowd for an hour is exercise. And maybe that's why he still has rallies. These are really just, workouts for him.
Yeah, he having to take in all of the visuals, really work out his eyes. And by the way, Chris, who you just quoted, it's funny. He gets a lot of crap from a lot of people. I like Chris. I think his tweets are pretty funny. I dig them. So Trump, it's going to be interesting to see if, again, I don't want to, I could do a few more push-up myself, but interesting to see if he faces any health problems as this moves on, because people have noticed in the past couple of days and weeks that he has definitely put on some weight since he became president. So who knows if that'll actually affect how he works or his health at all. And the last thing to come out of the G7 meeting, which would be minor if it wasn't the Trump administration, at least in my view, is that they put a picture up there of all the leaders' spouses. You have like Melania there on the White House's social media, and it names everybody except for the one person who is the husband of the Prime Minister of Luxembourg. He's the only current openly gay head of state. And his name wasn't there. And it was pointed out almost immediately that this happened. Like, people were like, what the hell? Why are you leaving this guy's name out there? And it took them 10 hours to fix it. I mean, maybe Dan Scavino was still reeling from his meeting with the Pope or something. But it seems that with all of the nonsense they put up with, maybe you try to, keep that at a minimum if possible and not do something as ridiculous as leaving that off.
So to give credit where it is due, the gentleman's name is actually Gauthier Destiné, and he is the the husband of the Prime Minister of Luxembourg. So if nobody else wants to give him the credit where it's due, then we should at the very least. Before we go any further, why don't you guys take a listen to another member of the ACE Podcast Network.
Thank you for seeing me today, Doctor.
Of course. I see you're having some issues.
Yeah, it all started when I ran out of podcasts to listen to. I felt anxious, alone, and even scared.
It happens all too often. Podcast deficiency disorder. It can be a serious struggle with no answer in sight. Until now.
Introducing Nerdy Words from Geek Productions. Through intense peer review studies, the Nerdy Words team have developed the perfect formula to finally defeat all symptoms of PDD.
With just one episode a week, your feelings of helplessness through lack of podcast satisfaction will be a thing of the past. With heavy doses of off-the-cuff, barely put-together thoughts about all things nerdy and beyond, your PDD will melt away.
Side effects include frustration at hosts' inability to accurately quote facts, annoyance at their often bitchy attitudes, and inability to understand them through their drunken slurs every 5 episodes. Do not listen if you're nursing, pregnant, or may become pregnant.
Comics, movies, anime, video games, and much, much more with Nerdy Words. Fridays on acepodcastnetwork.com.
All right, one of the last things I have to talk about today, Kevin, and there's not really much to talk about right now, other than the fact that maybe we should just not talk about it because we don't know what we're talking about, is the FBI director's job. Trump keeps saying he wants to get this taken care of very quickly, and we mentioned, I think, 12 people who were vying for this job a few weeks ago. Then the next week came in that, no, forget them. Joe Lieberman, our former senator from Connecticut, was the lead candidate, and now he's out of there. I don't know who the hell's going to get this. I think we'll probably just wake up one morning and Trump has tweeted at 7 o'clock in the morning Eastern time that here's who's going to give it, and maybe somebody crazy and maybe somebody good. We won't know till we hear it.
It's a crapshoot.
That's pretty much what you can say about anything in the Trump administration, I think. What's going to happen? Well, it's a crapshoot.
There's a magic 8-ball somewhere in that White House that he shakes, and what should I do today?
Indeed. All right, Kevin, you got us Kevin's Corner?
I sure do, Jesse. Today, actually, my thoughts are twofold. One, on this Memorial Day, I remember those who paid the ultimate price in defense of the ideals of an imperfect, but nevertheless great, nation. And also, this week, I had the opportunity to host a Holocaust survivor, Marion Blumenthal-Lazan, at the school where I teach. She gave an absolutely riveting talk to our students about the perils she faced as a young girl living through such unimaginable horrors in the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. In the same week, I was also lucky enough to take a cruise around New York City, which brought me face to face with the Statue of Liberty. As I took in the majestic beauty of this symbol of American prosperity and acceptance, I could not help but think of what Mrs. Lazan had spoken about regarding the willingness of America and Americans to accept her and her family upon their arrival after the war and her liberation. Seeing Lady Liberty, torch held high overhead, lighting the way towards New York Harbor and our great nation beyond, gave me hope that at best, regardless of politics and partisanship, we still represent freedom and opportunity to all of those oppressed peoples around the world who seek it. Leaders come and go, but our nation remains the same. That is my America. Always has been, always will be.
Well, that was just wonderful, Kevin. And, you know, it means something to me that I knew some survivors of the Holocaust as well, and my family came through Ellis Island, so that site of the Statue of Liberty meant something to my great-grandfather when he came in the early 1900s. Also, you promised to take me and some other people on that same cruise, so I hope to be able to describe the exact same scenario that you just did, too.
Yeah, when I wasn't waxing poetic, I was enjoying myself out on the dance floor of this cruise ship.
Open bar, which is fantastic. So, all right, everybody. Thanks again for sticking with us. I know it was a longer wait than normal due to my being in Minnesota for work, so I really appreciate you guys sticking with us. By the way, I made a new friend on the cab ride home to the airport. He was Somali, and we talked a lot about politics. I gave him our card, so if you're listening here, man, thanks a lot to my Somali Lyft driver. I forget your name. And to all of our wonderful listeners, again, thank you for listening, and we'll hope you're here for the next episode. Until then, go to our website at www.grabthembythepod.com, and remember that only you can prevent forest fires. Now, only you can make a difference. So we can all make a difference, and we hope together we keep doing this podcast and making sure that this country is as great as possible. So thank you, everyone, and thank you, Kevin.
Later.
Bye.